Thank you for joining us today on our webinar, which focuses on product categorisation and the new PPE regulation. There are two of us from BSI on today's webinar. My name is Charlotte Brody and I'm the Sector Propositions Manager for Construction and Personal Safety, and I'm joined by Nathan Shipley, our Certification Team Manager for PPE certification. This is what our agenda looks like today. Firstly, I'll go over a very brief recap on where we are with the PPE Directive and the current scenario, along with where you can find information that we released a few months ago. Then I'll hand over to Nathan, who will walk you through an overview of the product categorisation. He'll take a look at the categories in more detail, the PPE regulation modules, the key differences, and how they affect you. And then I'll talk you through the latest timescales, preparing your business, and the support which is available from BSI. So as a quick recap, you should be able to see on your screen some key points about the directive. One of the first new approach directives, it's now over 20 years old, and as you'd expect, new technology needs to be reflected within the new directive. Throughout the course of 2015, we've seen the development of the new regulation to reflect these changes, working towards a final publication at the end of the year. Between 2016 and 2017 is the period of transition, after which, during 2018, you can work to the old directive or the new regulation. Then in 2019, the new regulation will apply. So the current scenario is that the formal text has not yet been issued, which means that the information presented here is based on draft documents, and we understand that whilst there may be small amendments, we anticipate that the details here are unlikely to change. If you missed our very first webinar in this series, the recording is still available at the web address on the screen. I'll now hand over to Nathan, who is going to talk you through the categories.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. I'm going to take you through the categorisation under the new PPE regulation and just give you some indications as to how that's going to affect manufacturers and distributors placing PPE products onto the marketplace. Just to give an overview of how the product categorisation works under the new PPE regulations, the structure of the regulation is very similar to that existed in the old PPE Directive. And then what it's done is it's categorised the personal protective equipment that falls within the scope of the regulation into three categories. These three categories are dependent on the level of risk that the PPE protects against, and it's broken down into three different categories. Category 1, which is operating to cover simple PPE. Category 2, which is medium risk, intermediate PPE. And then Category 3, which is complex PPE for high risk applications. The new PPE regulation is similar to the old directive in that it is quite explicit as to what it defines falls into Category 1 and Category 3. It does, however, still use a generalised definition of intermediate or Category 2 PPE, and it really is quite a catch-all for all those types of products that don't fall within Category 1 or Category 3. We'll go into the details as what goes into Category 1 and 3 later on in this presentation, just to give an indication as to what covers with those areas. So now we're going to go through each category individually and discuss some of the products that are going to fall within those different areas. Within the old PPE Directive, simple PPE was given a very specific definition in that it was classed as a simple design where the designer assumes the end user can himself assess the level of protection provided against the minimal risks concerned, the effects of which, when they are gradual, can be safely identified by the user in good time. So these are covering products such as mechanical action gloves, such as for gardening, also for cleaning of weak action and easily reversible effects. It's also covering the handling of hot components where the temperature doesn't exceed 50 degrees centigrade. Atmospheric agents which are neither exceptional nor extreme in nature, and minor impacts and vibrations which do not affect vital areas of the body and whose effects cannot be cause irreversible lesions. It also covers sunlight or sunglasses within that categorisation. So these are all products that we're familiar with as falling within the category 1 of the PPE Directive. The regulation then gives a slightly different definition in that it classifies simple PPE or category 1 PPE as PPE intended to protect users against minimal risks. Category 1 includes exclusive PPE intended to protect users against the following, and this includes superficial mechanical injury, contact with water or cleaning materials of weak action, contact with hot surfaces not exceeding 50 degrees centigrade, damage to the eyes due to the exposure of sunlight other than during the observation of the sun, and atmospheric conditions that are not of an extreme nature. So really what we're looking at here is a reduced list, and it's also being quite specific as to what those products are. Under category 2 PPE, under the old PPE Directive, it was basically a catch-all in that the definition was that this category includes all models of PPE which are neither covered by the simple design category nor the complex design categories. This category is also unofficially, as sometimes unofficially referred to as category 2, and it didn't list any products in there. Under the new PPE regulations, we're looking at a similar type of definition. It's including PPE that's intended to protect users against the risks other than those listed in categories 1 and 3. But what it does do is that it has the inclusion of made-to-measure PPE, where it includes made-to-measure PPE except where the risks of such PPE is intended to protect the users against category 1. Again, there's no specific products mentioned within that within the category 2 range. Under the old PPE Directive, again we had a very specific definition of what was category 3, and this was listing PPE of a complex design intended to protect against mortal danger or against dangers that may seriously and irreversibly harm the health, the immediate effects of which the designer assumes that the user cannot identify in sufficient time. And again, it had a very specific list of products that fell within that categorisation. So this included devices such as respiratory products, any type of device that was designed to give full insulation from the atmosphere. It included PPE providing protection against chemical attack or ionising radiation. It was also including emergency equipment for high temperatures above 100 degrees centigrade, and also emergency equipment for use in low temperatures less than minus 50 degrees centigrade. It included fall arrest equipment and also PPE designed to protect against electrical risks and dangerous voltages. Under the new PPE regulations, we're having a similar type of definition, and what it says is that category 3 PPE is intended to protect users against very serious risks such as death or irreversible damage to health. Category 3 includes exclusive PPE intended to protect users against the following risks. And then what it does is it comes up with a more comprehensive list of products which fall within that category. What we're looking at here is substances and mixtures that are hazardous to health. So this can include things such as chemical protective equipment, gloves, clothing, those types of things. Atmospheres with oxygen deficiency. So this can include things such as rebreathers or self-contained breathing apparatus. It includes harmful biological agents, so this is protection against microorganisms and those types of things. It also includes ionising radiation, and it also has similar parameters such as products which protect against air temperatures of at least 100 degrees centigrade and air temperatures of less than minus 50 degrees centigrade. What it has done here is it's removed the words emergency, so it's sort of specifying that any type of PPE that's using for those extreme temperatures falls in this category. Fall arrest is also included under the category 3, same as electrical shock and live working, so electrical protective gloves, helmets, those types of things. There are also some new specifics that have been included under the regulation. These include PPE to protect against drowning. Specifically highlighted is PPE that protects against handheld chainsaws, PPE to protect against high pressure jets, devices that are designed to protect against bullet wounds or knife stabs, and also PPE to protect against harmful noise. There are some muted changes that may occur. One of the things that is being discussed is whether head protection should fall under category 3. One of the reasons for this is because the potential life-changing and fatal outcomes that can occur from head injuries and the level of protection that's provided against head injuries with helmets, those types of devices. Under the new PPE regulation, the regulation is taking a modular approach. This is to bring it in line with other similar type European directives and regulations. And what it's doing is using similar types of terminology and modules that are used across other new approach directives and regulations. So the table ahead gives you an indication as to what the routes of compliance are required for the 3 different categories of PPE. So if you're manufacturing simple or category 1 type PPE and you're looking to place the product onto the market, under the old PPE Directive it was purely a manufacturer's self-declaration and no need for a notified body to be involved. The only possible involvement with a third party would be with an accredited test laboratory in the process of providing you with an accredited test report to show that your product met the essential health and safety requirements of the directive. Under the new regulation, this has been given a classification of Module A, and this is a very similar terminology that's used in other types of directives and regulations, which gives general rules and regulations as to what that conformity is. Now for category 2 and category 3 PPE, as part of the initial approvals process under the old directive, you had to satisfy the requirements through a notified body of Article 10 EC type examination. This has been renamed as Module B EU type examination. There are going to be some specific requirements called up within the regulation as to what type of documentation and what the requirements are to meet Module B. And once the regulation text is formally being published, we'll be running another seminar and also some face-to-face workshops to inform people as to what these requirements are and how people can meet these requirements. As with the old directive, once the Article 10 or the Module B has been issued, there will be no ongoing surveillance for Category 2 PPE. For Category 3 PPE, you will still have 2 options for ongoing surveillance. Under the old PPE Directive, if you're following the annual testing model, you are going down the Article 11A route. This is changing and it will be classified as Module C2. And again, the regulation is giving some detail as to what the conformance requirements are to meet Module C2. And once this document is published, we'll be giving additional workshops and webinars and seminars to go through what the detail is with regards to the new compliance module. If you're previously going down Article 11B under the PPE Directive, this module will be now known as Module D. Again, it's going to follow a very similar structure to the Article 11B, but there will be some various specifics that are called up under the regulation, and we'll be discussing those with our clients through webinars and seminars once the actual regulation document has been published. So the key differences and how they'll affect you. One thing that has been highlighted as a specific product type is solar eclipse viewers. They're specifically precluded from the Category 1 simple PPE. They weren't mentioned before in the old PPE Directive, but since that directive was published, there's been a number of high-profile solar eclipses across Europe, certainly in the UK, around about 5 or 6 years ago, and which highlighted the need for this type of PPE to be incorporated into the PPE Directive and future regulations. The list of complex PPE has some specifically referred to additions. These include cuts by handheld chainsaws, so they've been covered into the complex or Category 3 PPE. Also high pressure cutting equipment. These are devices where using demolition, high pressure water is being used to cut up concrete as part of dismantling of buildings. These types of PPE have been included under the Category 3 umbrella. Also, PPE protecting against bullet wounds or stabs, knife stabs, have been specifically listed under the complex PPE. The regulation also has an implication on importers and distributors who must ensure that PPE is properly certified before selling those onto end users into the marketplace. Perhaps one of the main changes that we are going to find within the PPE regulation is the moving of life jackets and hearing protection from the old PPE Directive Category 2 into the new PPE Regulation Category 3. So this is going to have an impact on those manufacturers that have been placing life jackets and hearing protection, such as earplugs and earmuffs, onto the marketplace. Whereas before they could just have the product type examination carried out by a notified body and then sell product onto the market. Now they're going to have some form of ongoing surveillance in place in order to meet the requirements of the PPE regulation.
Well, thank you, Nathan, for walking us through the changes and the categories in more detail. I'm now going to talk the timescales through with you. So this year, the European Council has been working through the text, and the PPE regulation we anticipate will be in the official journal by the end of 2015. And in 2016, the PPE regulation will come into force 20 days after being published in the journal. The regulation becomes applicable to notified bodies from the middle of 2016. And for manufacturers, the transition period runs from 2016 until the end of 2017. Throughout 2018, you can work to the old directive or the new regulation, and then from the end of 2018, the new regulation applies. So preparing your business. As we've mentioned before, a white paper is available now on our website for you to download, and we recommend you read this and start to understand the changes and work out if they will impact your business. And we also recommend that you become familiar with the new terminology, modules B, C2 and D. And as Nathan has just mentioned, if you manufacture hearing protection or life jackets, are you ready for the move to Category 3? And when the formal text is available, please join us for a later webinar where we'll walk you through these details. The critical point to remember is that products that have certified to withdrawn specifications can't be transitioned to the new regulation, and Nathan has highlighted some examples on the screen there for breathing apparatus and firefighters' helmets. So looking at the support from BSI, which is available, you can see we have the white paper, we have the previous webinar that we ran a few months ago talking about the top line changes, and we've also been out speaking with manufacturers at various events throughout the year. The next event, for anyone planning to attend, is at the A+A exhibition in Dusseldorf at the end of October. And as Nathan has mentioned, we anticipate that further events will be announced in 2016. And of course, our formal text webinar will also be available for you to join. So that concludes the slides that we wanted to share with you today. What we have actually had since this session has been running is a few questions have come in from people on the call. So Nathan, I'm going to pass these questions over to you. The first one that has come in is somebody who currently makes hearing protection, and they're asking how long do they have to get some form of ongoing surveillance in place.
Thanks, Charlotte. Well, as we mentioned earlier on, hearing protection as well as life jackets are going to be moving from Category 2 to Category 3 under the new PPE regulations. And the absolute cut-off time for manufacturers of those products to get a Module C2 or Module D system in place is going to be by the end of 2018. We've got a transition period between 2016 2017, and then a time when both regulation and directive run concurrently through 2018. So the absolute drop dead time that they have to get some form of ongoing surveillance in place for will be the end of 2018.
That's great, thank you. And another question, which is around, under the new regulation, can I still use one notified body for my Module B approval and a different one for my Module D approval? Could you help shed some light on that for us?
Yes, the regulation and the directive are going to take similar sort of formats in that stance, in that currently if you've got your Article 10 approvals through one notified body, it's perfectly acceptable to have your ongoing surveillance audits carried out by another notified body, and the directive is geared up for that type of situation. The regulation will also carry out under the same sort of means, in that the regulation, it will be perfectly acceptable to have your products EU approved through Module B through one notified body, and then a separate notified body carrying out your ongoing surveillance under Module B. So yes, it will take the same sort of format, and you can have two different notified bodies being used in that process.
We've now got a question about ISO 9001. Do I need to have a registered ISO 9001 system in place to meet Module D under the new regulation?
At the moment, it's looking no. It's going to follow the same sort of format again as under the PPE Directive, in that the Module D will have its own specific requirements for a documented quality plan. There will be a requirement to have a documented quality plan under Module B, under the PPE regulations, but it won't have to be registered to ISO 9001. It will just need to meet the requirements of the new regulation. And I say, once we get details on that, we'll be including that in future webinars and seminars as to what manufacturers need to do and any changes they need to make. Going by some of the draft documents so far, the Module D is becoming a bit more encompassing with regards to things like the declarations of conformity and documentation control and that type of thing. But as I say, once we get a formalised text on that, we'll be letting people know, as I say, through the webinar or seminar format.
So this one has come in. Does compliance to EN 166 2001 still ensure compliance to new PPE?
Yes, the way that the standards are being managed is remaining unchanged. So we're still going to have a list of standards referenced on a thing called the Official Journal, which is accessible through the EU Europa website. And if those standards are referenced on the Official Journal, then the presumption of conformity to the regulation will remain. So at the moment, a product compliant with EN 166 2001 will meet the requirements of the regulation. When we were discussing withdrawn standards before, what we're really looking at is some of those standards that may be in circulation, or sorry, some of those products that are in circulation that are manufactured to standards that have not been listed in the Official Journal as of today. And they're the ones that people really need to have a look at and seeing about looking and getting those modified.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell us, are distributors affected by these changes in any way?
The new regulation is having an emphasis on distributors within the supply chain, and whereas before it was kind of towards the end of the, it stopped the end of the manufacturers placing PPE onto the market. It's now including distributors within the text of the regulation, and it's also giving specific roles for distributors and also other people such as authorised representatives in a lot more clearer fashion. As I say, once we get information with regards to what that text will be officially saying, we'll be letting people know through future webinars and seminars and things.
Okay, great. So that does conclude all of the questions that have come in today. So just to share with you what's next, if you would like to visit our webpage, that's where we are going to be sharing updates as they become available. And our contact details are on the screen there for you. If you have very specific requirements, by all means get in touch, and we will do our very best to help answer those questions as this scenario kind of is as it is currently. But thank you very much to everybody for joining. Thank you to Nathan for sharing such useful information. I hope everybody has found it a good session, and we look forward to contacting you again with new information in the near future. Thank you very much.